Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Professor Lubanda.
Yes, good afternoon, brother. How are you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
A very special greetings from South Africa. I see we've got the world on virtual today.
I can hear you.
When we're talking about, can you hear me? Yeah, great. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Victor Sibeko. I'm the moderator for today's discussions. Very interesting afternoon filled with a lot of speakers, and we are privileged to have amongst us Africa, fully represented by South Africa, Kenya, and Uganda. Then we have Iran, joined by Switzerland. Then we have got the USA and India. Ladies and gentlemen, the Africa Brand Summit is a brainchild of Mr. Solly Moeng, the MD of Don Valley Reputation Manager based in Cape Town, and a past president of PRISA. The Africa Brand Summit, in partnership with the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa and PRAU Lumumba Foundation, is delighted to host and present the 6th Africa Brand Summit monthly series, which we started because of COVID. We are unable to meet in person, but we can find alternative ways to do so and engage constructively. And some of these engagements do not have to be smooth sailing, they have to be very disruptive. Now, Mr. Solly Moeng is known to be one of those that call a spade, not a big spoon for turning the soil upside down. Allow me this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, to first just share the house rules, which I am certain all of us know. When we are on a webinar, kindly mute all microphones. And when you want to speak, or when we open up for question and answers, you can raise your hand. And when you speak, please introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, and then ask or make a necessary comment. May I kindly, at this point in time, request the pleasure of being addressed by one of the greatest sons of Africa, who needs no introduction, but for the sake of this meeting, and those of you that might have not seen him, we are privileged to have him in our midst. Professor PRAU Lumumba will give us a word of welcome, but as he prepares to do that, I know he's always prepared. We're talking about something very interesting, something very challenging, country branding. But then as practitioners, we are saying, what is our role as public relations and communication practitioners? In Professor Lumumba's opening and welcome, he would sort of touch and break it down and take whatever approach that he's most comfortable with, laying the foundation for us to then take over from that. Professor PRAU Lumumba, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me thank Solly for energetically ensuring that this conversation remains alive during this very difficult period of COVID. It takes commitment, it takes passion, and it takes vision to tease out critical things in the life of our nations and indeed in the life of humanity at large. Today, we will engage for the next 1 hour in a subject that is as radical. Is a subject in which I claim no expertise, but is a subject that I believe in which we must all have an interest. That is the subject of branding of countries, particularly focusing on the continent of Africa, a continent that throughout the ages has been branded by others. There is a saying which, depending on whoever you are speaking to, is attributed to many African ethnicities or nations. As long as the lions do not have their historians, it is not the bravery of the lion, but the exploits of the hunter that will be talked about. Africa, unfortunately, finds herself in such a situation is defined properly as she should, is not by design, but by accident. And that is why it becomes very necessary to ask ourselves, what is the role of branding? Many of you will be familiar, and your typical American in the street will ask you whether you have ever seen a car before you sojourned into their land. You'll be familiar with comments in Europe and even in Asia as to whether Africa is like the rest of them. And many are they that come to the continent and are amazed at what has happened over the years, even in the face of the difficulties that the continent continues to receive. And indeed, many African governments, when they are called upon to market themselves, are quick to engage European firms, American firms, which their branding, permit me to say, is largely Eurocentric, so that Africa will be famous for the safari, for the big five. Africa will be known for giraffes. Africa will be known for buffaloes. Africa will be known for lions. Africa will be known for rhinos. Africa will be known for animals. And if she is not for animals, she'll be known for rivers and natural resources and natural features, not her energetic 1.5 billion people and their diverse and rich cultures. That is the preserve of museums, and that is fossilized in history and archaeology. So when we gather this afternoon, I would want to hear from practitioners in Africa who will be out there and look at branding not from a Eurocentric perspective, because many of our PR firms are Eurocentric in their DNA. And I'll be asking you during this interaction to liberate yourselves from what is fundamentally mental slavery. I'll be asking you to engage in a manner that will redefine how we relate to the world, how you market your culture to the world. And there is a friend, I'm told, from Iran. You may quarrel with the Iranians all you want, but they are proud about their Persian culture. You may quarrel with the Japanese all you want, but they are proud about being Japanese. You may quarrel with the Indians all you want, but they are proud about it. You may quarrel with the Koreans, but they are proud. But when it comes to us, let me be blunt, we who are of the African continent, our sophistication in marketing will be when we appear on CNN and we have been advised by some PR firm, which is based in London, Paris, Brussels, or Washington, DC. I'm asking you to liberate yourself. And if you are in the Europe, if you are in the French-speaking part of the world, your greatest joy is that some PR firm in Paris or Bruxelles is the one that led your PR. And if you are colonized by the British, You'll be happy whether you are in Kampala, Uganda, or Lusaka, Zambia, or Nairobi, Kenya, when you have some firm based in London telling you what to do. Branding and the ability to define oneself is the beginning of marketing yourself in the manner that is palatable to other civilizations. So without belaboring the issue, I believe that this afternoon's interaction will give us the opportunity to debunk some of the myths that we have about PR, to redefine PR and branding so that our default position is not what somebody in London tells us, but what somebody in Cape Town has an idea about, what somebody in Maputo has an idea about, what somebody in Bangui has an idea about. It is only when we begin to think in that way that our branding will at once be relevant and effective. You know, many times when I look at the statistics that are given to us about those who visit Africa, because this is part of the reason why we brand in tourism. Kenya, for example, has never received more than 2 million tourists. But if you go to the bazaar market in Turkey, in Istanbul, they have had the occasion to receive 90 million visitors. The question is, what do they do right that we don't? And if you look at the total number of tourists that come to the entire continent of Africa, excluding Morocco and Egypt, it is less than those who visit the Disney in the United States of America. I'm therefore suggesting to us that one of the ways in which we are going to handle the entire question of PR, the entire question of communication, the entire question of branding is if we begin to think not outside of the box, because who creates this box that we must think inside of or outside of? We think without the box. And I'm suggesting to you, ladies and gentlemen, that that is the kind of interaction that I will find enriching this afternoon so that we are able to brand ourselves in a manner that will enhance our self-esteem and project us in a positive light. That is all I wish to say. I wish you good and sound interaction. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Prof. You know, there is a button here for giving a round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, the professor has said it all. He has laid the foundation. He has said quite a mouthful, and he's also challenged us as the public relations and communication management practitioners to not only think out of the box, but throw the box far away from us. Please allow me to invite the president of PRISA, President Tebogo Ditshego, to also just have a word of welcome, 3 minutes or so, and then we can get started with our day's deliberations after that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sibeko. Thank you to the CEO of PRISA. My name is Tebogo Ditshego. I'm the president of the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa, as well as the Chief Executive Officer of Ditshego Media, which is a public relations agency. Now, I'm very grateful to share this platform with you, esteemed guests. Thank you very much, Professor Lumumba, for the work that you're doing, as well as that great introduction that you just gave us. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Moeng. He's a previous president of PRISA and is now the convener of the Africa Brand Summit. Congratulations, Mr. Moeng. We're really proud of the work that you're doing. Now, as we discuss the role of public relations in branding a country, I think the historical context is correct. And as Professor Lumumba has said, until the lions have their own storytellers, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And that is true. I think the biggest mistake that we've made as Africans is when telling our story, we do not hold the pen. We allow everybody to hold the pen of the story of Africa, except Africans. And the most unfortunate thing about this is that even our education system does not take our continent's history into the confidence of the kids. So the kids do not know the history of architecture, science, and technology in Africa. They do not know. I mean, they study about Pythagoras in high school, in the mathematics lesson, but they don't know that Pythagoras learned the Pythagorean theorem from Black people in ancient Egypt. And this is things that if young people knew their history, they would grow up to be more confident. So before you can brand yourself out there, you need to know yourself. You need knowledge of self. You must know your history. You must be proud of yourself. And then once you know yourself, we can agree on what do we stand for as a country, as a region, as a continent. And then we'll be able to sell ourselves to the world. And so a brand is different things. A brand is a promise. And the more you are aligned to the brand, the more credible is your brand. The more you break the promise is the less credible you are. So if you are as a country saying that you give equitable opportunities to everyone, you are rooted in justice, you are rooted in prosperity, that citizens of your country all have an equal shot to make it and realize their potential, you can't just say it, you have to be about it. That is what a strong brand is all about. And so we're not here to put makeup on the face of a pig. We are here to redefine the story of African, rooted in the truth of the history of the African continent. And so when you look at the Global Destination Index, number one is Thailand. And they have about 22 million tourists that go into their country each year. Now, how does Thailand do it? If you look at the African landscape, you look at different African countries, there's very little that Thailand offers that we cannot offer. In fact, there probably isn't much. But if you look at the presence of the culture and the heritage of Thailand in the global village, if I want a Thai massage 30 minutes away from me anytime, almost anywhere I am in South Africa, I can get a Thai massage, which is a part of the heritage of Thailand. But if you want perhaps to get food from Africa, maybe in New York, how long would you have to travel to get the food? So the presence of the culture and the heritage in other countries is critical for you to garner interest, for you to want to go to that country and to experience the heritage and the culture of the other country. I also think that we need to learn how to be more deliberate in our approach and to really invest in marketing our countries. And so it would be very comprehensive in that it's not just saying that this is a great country, but you would fund businesses from different African countries to go into other parts of the world. That's what they do in China. Almost any country you go to, you will find China Mall. You will find the culture of China. You will find Italian food, pizza. You will find the different cuisines from the different places in the world, including all of these fast food chains that come from the United States. You'll find their movies everywhere in the world. But where is our culture? Where are our products in the other places of the world? And if we cannot take our products, our culture, and what we give to humanity to the rest of the world, we will find it difficult to garner interest in bringing people to Africa. And so Africa is not the land of poverty. Africa is one of the most beautiful countries, sorry, excuse me, it should be a country. It's one of the most beautiful landscapes in the world. And we do not really know how to push that into the rest of the world. But if we fail to push it within ourselves, we are really going to struggle to take it towards the world. So my message today is, let us first seek and understand thyself. Let us teach the future generations about the history of Africa. We talk about Plato, who is a philosopher. Plato learned for 13 years in ancient Egypt. At that time, it was Africans who were running ancient Egypt in those times. And so, but we don't know these stories. And so for the purposes of this topic, we might want to say that the brand is about what you are about. It's about the perception that people have about you. And so how do you shift the perception from within and push the perception outwards? You have to introduce people to who you really are. And how are we going to do this? Colleagues, I think the floor is yours. You are welcome. Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to a very constructive conversation. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, President Ditshego, for quite a mouthful and words of wisdom right there. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get to the real deal, real conversations, we are delighted that not only we concentrating on Africa, but we've got the global colleagues in the continent, in the world joining us. May I ask Mr. Maxim Baha, the president of the World Communication Forum Association, to give Africa Brand Summit and this meeting in particular words of support. Mr. Baha.
Thank you, President Sibeko, President Lumumba, President Moeng, of course, PRISA President. This is the time slot of the President, so I'll try to be very, very short. You guys, you see here, my colleagues from the World Communications Forum in Davos, Jon-Hans, of course, Solly Moeng, Jacqueline from the United States. And I think that in the World Communications Forum, we are a brilliant example how to keep the brand awareness of our countries and to work in a united mechanism doing good things. This is the same like you will be discussing today. All of us, we care about our clients. We care about our relations. We care about our friends, our families. But when we talk about brands, then we are absolutely sure that number one and the most important brand is the brand of our country, is the brand South Africa, brand Kenya, brand Zambia, brand Tanzania, and most probably brand Africa in this case. But although Africa is a very powerful brand, you guys are very different. You know, Morocco, Egypt are totally different from Nigeria or Botswana or South Africa, Namibia, and all those countries. So on one hand, we must care about the beautiful brand of Africa. And on the other hand, we must care about the brand of our countries. There is no more important task for us as a public relations and public affairs expert than to keep the brands lively. And again, in the World Communications Forum Association, we are trying to keep our cultures, to have good relations between us, to create brilliant projects. Mina, Nazari from Iran, I apologize, I missed you because I just saw you on the picture. So, but on the other hand, we care a lot about keeping the unity of our joint business code, public relations. Therefore, I really wish you a good discussion today. Please interrupt each other. I mean, but make good points and be critical to each other, like we do in the World Communications Forum Association. And at the end of the day, I really hope that the branding will have another important step, the branding of Africa in our discussions. For my friends in South Africa, I can say Amandla Ngoeto. And for my friends in Africa, I can say Africa One. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. One Africa, that is a slogan of the African Population Association, APRA. One Africa, Amanda.
There you go.
Thank you so much. We've had three very most senior special guests today. Before we get to the real deal now and start unpacking this topic, may I invite Mr. Solly Moeng, the convener of the Africa Brand Summit, just to say a word or two. I'm giving you 2 minutes there. I know I was generous with other speakers, but for you, 2 minutes. Mr. Moeng.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm not going to repeat all the greetings that have already been made by everybody, by Victor, who's hosting this event. I didn't want to say too much because, you know, I tend to have difficulties stopping. But I think it's important that I say 2 things. One, we're discussing communications and PR destination branding in Africa, but Africa does not exist in a vacuum. That is why it is important to have all our colleagues. I'm also vice president of the World Communication Forum Association, together working with Maxim, who's just spoken, and my other colleague, Jon-Hans, who's going to speak later. And we have colleagues from, as you said, from New York, from India, from Iran here with us. The purpose of that is that Africa doesn't exist in a vacuum, on an island of its own. No brand exists in an island of its own. Otherwise, you end up being too inward looking. It's important that, I like what the president of PRISA said earlier, it's important that we tell our stories. It's important that we know ourselves. We can't tell our stories in a more convincing way if we don't know ourselves first. But we also have to know that we exist as part of a global ecosystem. How do we differentiate ourselves from others, so that we stand apart, so that we become attractive, so that we're not trying to be somebody else? You can't be a global modern African if you don't know yourself, but you also, if you don't know what's going on in other parts of the world. So it's important that we do this. That's the first thing. The second thing I would like to say to you, so those of you who've been on this Africa Brand Summit journey from the beginning know that we usually have 2-day summit. We've had it in 2018, 2019. Last year it was hybrid. This year we decided to keep the conversations going, partnered with awesome people like the Professor Lumumba Foundation, the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa, World Communication Forum, and others, so that we keep the conversations going. We're not going to have a 2-day event this year, but at the end of the year, we'll have the awards, because part of the Africa Brand Summit is not only to talk about things that are not working, that we should be doing differently. It's also to look around the continent, because there are some awesome Africans, truly awesome Africans all over the continent and in the diaspora, who are doing good things that we as Africans can look at and say, you know what, there's hope for tomorrow. And the whole award section of the Africa Brand Summit, which will happen in early December, somewhere in Africa, we haven't decided where, is to celebrate those Africans who are doing awesome things for this Africa of ours. So please look out. If you are interested in receiving the program for the rest of the year and what's going to happen with the summit, if you want to enter the awards, to nominate somebody for the awards, go to the website, www.africabrandsummit.co, nominate, and the whole criteria is there on how people can qualify to be considered for an award. Enjoy today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moeng, for that warm welcome and an overview of the Africa Brand Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, we've now come to the real deal. With us today is South Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Iran, Switzerland, the United States, and India. A big conversation, big discussion, and we're delighted to say that for the first time with our webinars, we've reached a threshold. We know with 100 guests that have joined us. And if you're unable to join us, you can catch us on the Facebook. Just go to find us there. And to those of you that might want to tweet about the event, 2021 Africa Brand Summit webinar, that's where you'll find us. Ladies and gentlemen, the question is, what makes a brand successful? What is a country brand? There are two things when we talk about country brand. It's a country and a brand. And a brand is made up by a whole lot of things that happens around it, including promotion, advertising, and many other things. But there's a lot of perceptions that also go along with the brand. Now, on our program or on our flyer, we will be very diplomatic, and I'll be a true gentleman and say, ladies first. Please allow me to invite Dr. Mina Nazari, a member of the World Communication Forum Association based in Iran. But before she takes up the platform, the question is, what is your take or view of Iran as a brand over and above what people say and how people perceive you? But before you start, please just briefly introduce yourself and then respond to the topic. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Iranian Communication Society, allow me to extend a warm welcome to you. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Mina Nazari, and I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about country brand and PR communication. My talk is divided two parts. The first part is history of public relations and role of that country branding. The second part in the important role of country branding. History of public relations in Iran. The main products with which Iran is known are fruits, carpets, and most importantly, oil. And you know, these carpets in American White House were woven and sent from Iran and are still available in this place. On the other hand, Iran has been one of the main exporters of oil for many years. But in the current situation, this is not the case now. In previous years, a country with oil and mineral reserves was considered a rich country. The public relations of the oil company goes through two periods. The first period from 1946 and to 1948, and the second period from 1948 to 1951. When the expropriation took place, in the first period, the publication of the British Iranian Oil Company were published with such a weekly news and daily news, and were limited and mostly domestic. And the second period, the Johar's organization is created from delete with the exclusive offer of public relations. In this part, I'd now like to move on the next part in age of brand. Everything hasn't changed, but how? In modern age, many companies and organizations believe that their most valuable asset, brand of their services are products. 70% of the wealth of top companies is from their brand equity. The brand value of some companies is higher than the income of many developing countries. The total non-oil export of Iran in 2050 was about $42 billion, which is half of the value of Coca-Cola and Coca-Cola brand, or the third of Google brand, or quarter of the Apple brand. Can you hear me?
We seem to be losing you as you carry on with. Please carry on.
What?
We do hear you very well.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I just 1 minute. I feel you can't hear me. Yeah. Which means half of value of Cola brand, or the third of the Google brand, or the quarter of Apple brand. Branding is process of changing or acquiring and creating a place in people's minds. Branding is involved version of marketing. According to Keeler, Kevin Keeler, the world is now in the age of branding since 2013. Here is a quick recap of the main point of this section. Wait a minute. Public relations can play a key role in branding and in creating a brand mind. First, implement this mentality within the organization, and then conceptualize outside the organization and the public mind. This role can be widely importantly in the form of the branding campaign, continuous implementation and evaluation and modification of behavioral pattern, review of feedback, and help to constantly and durability of the brand and public relations unit. On the other hand, today's now social media, along with web applications and smart data and basic and vital tools of public relations, have created such an intelligent communication space. The result of this intelligent communication and the capacity of entity-wide participation of the type of negotiations, everyone at all levels of internal and external communication and social network. South Africa is a country with a lot of potential for building a positive PRAU Africa brand imaging by managing social concerns such as health, education, poverty. Like Professor Lumumba, I hope I spell it correct, culture of South Africa can be managing and it can be a positive South Africa brand imaging. Public relation and social network as a new means of communication have an effective role in branding and brand development of an individual, organization, and country branding. And public relation experts must have skills and media literacy to use these facilities properly. Maxim Bahar, my president in WCFA, in his book, Global Revolutions, which I have recently translated to Persian, is pointing to an important role of public relations in branding, and I recommend it. Another thing I'd like to expand on this point, which group of global communication experts and strategy model for organization branding in the coming days, and I will invite friends who are interested in participating in this project. Thank you very much for my friends in WCFA and Solomon and all of you for pay attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that presentation. I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you're taking notes because later on we will allow for interaction. We've got quite a good lineup and wouldn't like to really labor the point and going back to what our speaker has just shared with us, Dr. Mina Nazari. But what we'd like to do now is we're picking up a lot about culture, cross-culture, and communication when we talk about country branding, because a country is a brand, and branding goes a long way in making what the country stands out for. And one of the countries in the continent that has actually stood out in terms of doing very well in the space of tourism, which recently has changed a little bit, is Kenya. But we recently saw a lot of effort that is being put in by a marketing team trying to position Kenya favorably. Now we have with us Dr. Wilfred Marube, who is the president of the Public Relations Association of Kenya. Dr. Marube, may we ask you to quickly introduce yourself, and then in your overview, quickly tell us about Kenya and as a brand, and Kenya as a recovering country when it comes to tourism. Dr. Marube. Okay. We don't seem to have him on board. Okay, I'm just checking. Okay, let's move on. Oh, thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Victor. I was struggling with my gadgets. It's a pleasure to be part of this great conversation today, which has been contextualized by the challenge and words of Professor.
Can you hear Dr. Marube, ladies and gentlemen? We seem to be battling on our side. He froze a bit.
We can't hear him.
Okay. Dr. Marube, we seem to be battling. You froze a bit and you're no longer on the main screen. Okay. In the interest of time, while he's trying to sort himself out with connectivity, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to move ahead and now call upon a very special lady who is a past president of the Uganda of PRAU, the Population Association of Uganda, who now runs her own organization, a company, Population and Communication Management a company, to really grace us with a introduction as well as give us an overview of your understanding of the topic.
Good afternoon, Victor and colleagues on here. How is South Africa?
South Africa is very well and cold, Madam Sarah Kagingo.
I wish you good health. I wish you all very good health. A big shout out from Uganda. My name is Sarah Kagingo, Managing Director of Soft Power Communications. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you, PRISA, for organizing this. Uganda, as you all know, is one of the countries in East Africa. We are home to the friendliest people on the continent. We have been voted severally by expatriates as the friendliest country in Africa, and we are very, very proud to have branded ourselves as the Pearl of Africa, following one of history's great persons, Winston Churchill, who on a trip to Uganda described us as the Pearl of Africa. We are, of course, home to the largest collection of mountain gorillas, source of the world's longest river. And while Victor in South Africa experiences winter, we do not have winter in Uganda. We have no summer, but we have great weather Monday to Monday, January to January, that needs no weather conditioning. So we are proud to be contributing to such a great topic that that seeks to rebrand Africa and to have PR and comms practitioners make a great contribution to the change of narrative about Africa. Just recently, actually last year in 2020, we saw several countries in the West saying Africa was about to be hit hard by COVID. Our tourism was very affected by lockdowns, and many of our leaders acted very fast in controlling the numbers. In Uganda, we delayed our first infection, delayed our first deaths. Unfortunately, now we are in a second lockdown, but infections have been limited owing to the fact that communications and PR practitioners are doing a great job communicating great messages against the spread. So we have a very big role as PR and comms practitioners, one in managing, in limiting the spread, but the bigger picture is to ensure that never again is Africa branded as a country of disease. Actually, many people outside there, when you travel, think Africa is one country, and yet we are a great continent of diverse culture, although interconnected. Because for us here in East Africa, I can speak Swahili just like Dr. Marube, president of PRSK Kenya. I can speak several of the languages in the Great Lakes region, in Eastern DR Congo, in Northwestern Tanzania, and I pick some from Zimbabwe and actually South Africa. I pick some of the words. So we are interrelated. We are a hospitable people with a very rich culture, friendly people, big innovators this time, great stories that we must focus on and project our continent as one that contributes to the growth of industry, one that is focused on transformation of our people, other than disease, death, as we see most of the time in the media and many times our own media. Thank you.
Wow. Asante Mamze Kagingo. Thank you so much for that. It is evident, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, reminding you, take notes because we will come back to you. We would like to have your interaction. We've got interesting things coming up. That what makes a brand is also the environment, the weather, the friendliness of the people, rich culture, and all these things add up to what then makes a country a desired destination. And that brand that we're talking about, over and above many other things that we can unpack. Now, I'm going to invite somebody very special, Jon-Hans Coetzer. He's one of the 3 presidents of the World Communication Forum Association. He is in a very special space, a United Nations team leader in education for online campus. Now, my question to you, Sir, is that we're talking about country and country branding, and you are in education. How much of these information do you have to deal with in terms of imparting knowledge on it, or how much of this information you come across having to deal with the questions to respond to what people may want to know about country and country branding? May I allow you to just first briefly introduce yourself and then give your impressions on the topic based on the few things that I've just mentioned to you. Over to you, Mr.
Thank
Coetzer.
you so much, President Sibeko, President of PRISA. Allow me also to extend the warmest of welcome to the almost 100 participants who was joining this important discussion. Thank you so much for honoring us by joining. So as you've heard, I have a bit of an identity crisis. I was born and raised in South Africa, and I'm now working essentially for the United Nations. I also work with my colleague that you will see, Dr. Shuda Chakravarti, and also with my colleagues from the World Communication Forum. For me, branding and education is all about catalysts that brings positive change. And I would like to throw a challenge back and to say, if we are not going to start to make sure that Africa, this vast, this rich, this beautiful, this resource-rich continent, very complex continent, if we are not going to start to create opportunities by drawing on the indigenous knowledge that we are so rich, richer than any other continent in this world, why are we still simply importing the narratives, the paradigms from other parts of the world? And this is where I joined Professor Lumumba when he was talking about so much of the coloniality that is locked up in our education. Branding, education needs to be those positive catalysts for change, because it should allow us as communicators, us as brand managers, as public relations, as communications individuals, to help startup companies, entrepreneurships, startup right now, as we try to make sense of this new COVID economy. There is so much opportunity, but what do? You have heard the names of Google, you've heard the names of Apple, so we are also partly to blame, because we create those opportunities for these multinational companies rather than to build and to strengthen by tapping into our indigenous knowledge and cultures and to put that forward and to build and to share. But I think to be able to do that, we need to also highlight what is Africa as a continent. And we talk very generally about the people, and I think it's just so important when we look at the resource richness that we don't use that culture, that know-how as a tradable commodity. It needs to be the local population, the local brothers and sisters that are able to benefit first and foremost, but also that the educational institutions can stand their own in the rest of the world. And where I just want to conclude is to throw a second challenge out there, is to say, we have this opportunity. What is going to be our outcome, my dear colleagues? What are we going to take forward so that when we meet next time, and this is something that President Max Beer have said, we sometimes have very tough, very direct discussions, but the one thing that we always agree on is we have a common goal that all of us work to. And this is my request to say, what is our goal that we're going to take forward at the end of this discussion, that when we meet again, we can show what we have achieved, so that we can use this important discussion as a platform to work towards all these ideas that we've identified. And I just want to say again to Professor Lumumba, I noticed, you know, these leaders that you had up in the back of on your wall. And again, ladies and gentlemen, we have a responsibility to make sure that the rich contribution that those individuals made, that their voices are not muffled in the noise of nationalism and populism. And my last request is just, let us all just be careful when we make statements about how the media is becoming more and more populist and more party political orientated. That change, we can influence it. We can create that positive change, because at the end of the day, we have that influence and power through communication. But let us not forget, it's not about just the powerful and those that can pay for accounts. It's about creating positive change. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. What a presentation! What a in a mind-blowing, a thought-provoking insight. We said something very important, which we will respond when we get to question and answers. But it is important that we are able to measure, because these webinars are the building blocks towards the final conference, which we're planning to have at the end of the year. But we have to also take notes and put some action plans in place, so that we don't just end up with a talk shop. We do not like that. We do not fancy that. Thank you so much, Mr. Jon-Hans Coetzer. Ladies and gentlemen, pardon me, I didn't mention this. He's from Lisbon, or Lisboa. So we've got almost the world all together in one. Now, please allow me to call upon Jacqueline Strayer. She is a public relations professor at New York University and the convener. Now, as you prepare to take the platform, every country is a brand, and we all know, we've heard that the success of a country is dependent on marketing to a certain extent. But one country that one may say does not even need marketing is a power brand on its own, and everybody is looking for that golden ticket to come to the United States of America. What is your take on this topic, and how do you see this country branding fit in what the United States has actually come up with and has made a name for itself? Jacqueline, over to you.
Unmute myself.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be with all of you today, and thank you for the kind introduction, and to see my friends and colleagues from the World Communication Forum Association, Maxim, and our other officers and colleagues, as well as distinguished people from all over the world, including one of my students from NYU I see is here, David, who I am so happy to see on this wonderful experience. I teach at NYU and Columbia University a range of 9 different courses across marketing, PR, and leadership. But that's a really much more recent part of my career. I spent 25 years in some of the biggest companies in the world and was an officer of 3 of them. And so my perspective is largely focused on how we think about marketing organizations, larger organizations and their brands. And I think that there's a lot to be learned in terms of that. You mentioned Google, someone mentioned Google, Apple, et cetera. These are huge companies that have enormous brands. What I hear emphatically is the amount of pride that people have in their continent of Africa and their respective countries. And that's a palpable quality. And one of the most important things about brands is that you actually feel an emotional connection to them. And I don't think we should minimize that, because it's an incredibly important part of how we think about country brands. And you all mentioned the cultural components, whether they're art, history, music, literature, cuisine, all the wonderful things that make going to different parts of Africa an experience. If we look at the United States, and I've been fortunate to travel the world and live in different parts of the world, the United States is seen as one country, but in fact, if you live here, you know it is not that. There are very different parts of the country that really differ in terms of their own cultural components, their political ideologies, which has become profoundly evident in the last few years, as well as other things that define this country. But I think one of the things that really has opened up the perception of the United States of America, in addition to the kind of political democracy, is opportunity and positivity. And I think with that, that is what I think there's an opportunity as you define the brand of the African continent and the respective countries that each have their own identities within it. One of the things in marketing, we look at what are the points of differentiation, and you've got them. You've got elements on the continent of Africa there is nowhere else. And I think that one of the important elements that needs to be communicated through, whether it's public relations, whether it's through social media, whether it's through marketing endeavors, is to really educate the world, and perhaps even your own people, what those elements are, and what are the things that make this continent unique. It's an experience to go to South Africa, Uganda, Zimbabwe. These are wonderful places that many people outside of those places have no understanding of. So I do think that there are some really critical elements in terms of education, in terms of amplification, and in terms of extension and advancement. Now, the future are our young people. And if we look at them, we need to engage them in this process. We need to engage the young Africans in the process of amplification. And how? Through social media, through a lot of the channels and tools that they use. The average millennial in the United States spends between 8 and 10 hours on social media. Big opportunity to amplify what the brand of Africa is. The other thing is that you need to actually identify people that are powerful voices and have those voices heard. Influencers, people that can actually extend the brand to communities that you need to connect with. I think that what we see is that things can go viral very quickly. We know that. We look at, for example, the shockwaves that went out when the Me Too movement surfaced several years ago and what happened around the world around that issue. There are opportunities and situations that we can learn from, and that's one of them. So if we want to actually amplify what is going on and and basically the brand of Africa and the various countries within it, we can actually look at some of those aspects of what actually happens in a crisis and amplify that through what can actually happen in a brand. So I think that there are wonderful ways that we can actually use some very powerful tactical methods to engage, inform, advance, and ultimately, you know, persuade people about what this continent of Africa offers to the world that you can get nowhere else.
Wow. I wish this coverage should go. We would love to have you live really at one of our events to speak. You've unpacked something very important. Now I understand why America, or United States of America, is called the land of opportunities. But you said something very profound: positivity, which is what we need. We need to be positive. We need to know who we are. We need to know what makes us tick. We know what makes us proud. And as a country, with everything else that we're doing. Thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I hope you're making notes. We're doing very well. It's 3 o'clock. We've got 30 minutes to go, and this is dedicated to Q&A. But before I do that, please allow me to bring back Dr. Wilfred Marube, from the president of the Public Relations Association of Kenya. He is back. Yes. Okay. So we bring in Dr. Marube. We lost him. So after that, we will then continue and bring in Dr. Suda. Okay, Dr. Marube.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. Mine will be to reinforce what the previous speakers have said, but perhaps do it from a Kenyan perspective. And also re-emphasize that for us to talk about nation branding, we really need to begin from an aspect of identity. Just a question of understanding, who are we as a people? Who are we as our country? Who are we? Which kind of aspirations do we have? What kind of experiences are available in that particular country in terms of natural resources, in terms of unique cultural experiences, in terms of what I would call opportunities, either for trade, opportunities for investment, opportunities for education, how do we take care of the vulnerable people in the society, and such like. So I do believe that for us, that the nation branding is a sum total of all those small elements and experiences. But for me, the big question would be, bearing in mind that you are speaking to an audience of communication experts or PR experts, so to speak, looking at from the various countries we come from, who is currently responsible for nation branding? Where is that voice coming from? Who is that person coordinating the experiences, packaging them, and everything else? I think for me, that's a big question we need to ask ourselves. And then we takes us to the next question. How can communication specialists, by talking about communication, I'm using them interchangeably with public relations specialists, take the lead and then coordinate everyone else so that the expertise is shown on how the aspect of nation branding can be able to be done. And then the last question I would want to probably, which I believe should be the focus of this particular discussion, is that what strengths do communication experts possess to make us the leaders in this particular conversation? And I think for me, when we discuss this question from those three aspects, then we shall be able to provide leadership as communication experts so that we can help our countries. Bearing in mind that in the aspect of nation branding, African countries are at disadvantage. Disadvantage in the case that we do not own the narrative, we do not own the perception that, especially for the rest of the world, Africa is seen as one, but not as a composition of different identities and such. So for me, I do believe that the kind of strength that we as professionals in this conversation today bring to the table is our ability to be able to understand the diverse audiences who are supposed to experience the perceptions, bearing in mind that a brand comes out as a sum total of the perceptions which are generated by a country, be they from the economical point of view, be they from the social point of view, be they from the political point of view, be they from the cultural point of view. And this needs to be taught us that we as national, I would call them national associations of communication experts, to what extent have we contributed to the national dialogue in terms of policy formulation? Just the national policy, just formulation, because at the end of the day, you realize that what is challenging most countries, I would say, is the ability to coordinate and package and present this experience as one. And communication experts can help in that, in developing a policy framework, in crafting national strategies on nation branding, but most importantly, in crafting channels or in deciding which channels can be used, because we as communication experts are the owners of channels. If we're not the owners of channels, then we understand which channels are geared towards the audiences that we want to reach to, while appreciating that you're talking about a global audience. So I do believe that my challenge is to us today, even before sharing the Kenyan experience, is that as comms experts, are we taking the lead in nation branding? Or are we letting nation branding be done by our politicians, by other people? To what extent are we creating ambassadors within our countries? Because nation branding is inside out. You have to brand internally among yourselves. You believe in your identity, you articulate it, you give that experience, and then it becomes more believable. And then you have more ambassadors who are able to do that. And as Kenya, I do believe we have an advantage. I do believe we are one of the few countries which have an advantage of having so many Kenyans in the diaspora. And I do believe people who live outside the country are very key in being the ambassadors for the nation brand. Because for me, from where I sit, and I do believe most professionals sit, nation brand can best be driven through ambassadors. Because the word of mouth is how they project themselves, how do they behave, and everything else. So as a way of concretizing all my argument, the challenge is, are communication experts providing the leadership required in nation branding? And if not, what can we do differently to provide that leadership? Because for me, that is a space, especially in Africa, that is devoid of leadership. I would want to probably pause there with those, I do believe, challenging questions, which I believe will be able to give us answers for this discussion this particular afternoon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marube. Ladies and gentlemen, the doctor has spoken. I am healed, because he has asked various serious questions that need answers, and we know the answers, and we know what is wrong. So all we need is to act, and that is the reason why Africa Brand Summit was established, to address these issues and get very disruptive in getting changes in order to get the brand, the country brand right, and hand it over to the right hands. Well, we will embark more on those questions that you've asked, and a very relevant question, Dr. Marube. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, now I'm going to call upon a very special guest, Dr. Sudha Chakravati. He's a group head of research at the European Union Business School. Doctor, you've heard it for yourself. So much that we need to talk about. As a person who is in academia, as a person that has to deal with the write-ups or writing of what the countries are all about and the brand and many other things, please just give us your overview of country brand and country branding, take into consideration what has been shared by other speakers. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. And I won't take long. First of all, thank you, Victor, for the introduction. Also, welcome to, I'll echo my colleague, Dr. Coetzer, to more than 100 participants who are joining us here. And this has been a great conference, and there has been many different views that have been very special. I have a few things that I want to say, and I also call a spade a spade. Although I live and work in Switzerland, I am originally from India. So there is a lot of similarity in terms of, let's say, the aspiration as well as the development processes, the historical context between the African continent, which again is not homogeneous. I don't understand. It's the same thing like when we teach the rise of Asia. I mean, what does it mean? Japan is very different from Yemen. Okay, and I think it's the same in Africa. Morocco is very different from South Africa. So to look at it homogeneously, it's I think you're just using one paintbrush kind of thing. Now, in terms of nation branding from an academic perspective, the subject is very, very new. I mean, we've had business brands and we have had product and service brands. And now we have come into, how do we brand our own nation, and nations should brand themselves and communicate. But I'll wager a bet not anybody knows how this is actually done. Okay, and that's the sad bit of it. Now, I've heard many people talking about culture, about history, etc., etc. It is emotional. It is very important. But let me give you an example. I've heard people mentioning Egypt. Egypt has a civilizational history of 7,000 years. The United States of America has a history of, let's say, 250 to 260 years. But if you compare the soft power, so sometimes history can actually drag you down. Cultural aspects can sometimes drag you down. And this is why when I teach international relations, and that's my focus, we are speaking about soft power, but sometimes soft power does not work, or there's a big confusion about it in terms of how do we really operationalize it. Something good for somebody might not be something good for somebody else. Now, I'll keep my intervention short because let's take questions rather and keep the discussion moving. How do we communicate our nation's brand? And here I want to bring in once again the United States of America. It's not just about the Google and the Amazons. The ability of a nation to brand itself in today's world will finally depend on the amount of global public goods it can produce. And by global public goods, I mean goods and services. I mean, those can be even values, which everybody benefits from, but nobody's willing to pay for it. So whether you're looking at Britain in the 19th century, bolstering international trade, whether you're looking at the United States of America with many of its bad foreign policies, but at least from 1945, driving global governance, it would depend finally on the meaning the countries are willing to make. And in today's world, at least in the digital world, and of course, Africa is in the forefront of a digital revolution, people understand you can position yourself the way you want. Okay, and communicators, marketeers, etc., take your best shot, but finally people get to understand what you stand for. And what you stand for has to be those values. Everybody is proud of their countries. Everybody can talk about the history. Everybody can talk about tourism. And that's why country branding has mostly been destination branding. It's not. And that's why we can still compare Africa to Thailand. So with that, I'll end my intervention, but I'm willing to take up any questions in the future. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Chakra, Doctor. And may I, at this point in time, apologize for having not respected or followed the protocol of not respecting Dr. Jon-Hans Coetzer. My apologies, sir. Doctor. So we've got a lot of doctors here. If there's something that can rub off from our guests, I would like this to rub off to me. I really would like to be a doctor as well. Ladies and gentlemen, now, the time you've been waiting for. I know you must have been itching to ask questions. I'm going to allow Mr. Moeng to first comment on something very critical that was raised on who is running country branding. And over and above that, he will just take us on where to from here. And then, if you're ready to ask your question, please raise your hand. Let me remind you, when you ask a question, introduce yourself and then shoot straight to the question. Okay, and also you can mention as to who is your question directed to, so that we make it easier. Thank you, Mr. Moeng.
Yes, yeah, hi, thank you very much. Awesome presentations, guys. I really enjoyed everything that was said here. I just want to respond to a few things before I ask a question and go back. First of all, every year we produce a report for the Africa Brain Summit. And the reason for this is that, and this is in response to what was said by Dr. Jon-Hans Coetzer earlier. The reason for this is because we don't want to just talk, go home and then come back next day to start where we left off the previous time. We want to try and conceptualize the decisions, the measured decisions that we made, and come up with a report that goes to the various stakeholders to say, look, these are the things that we discussed. This is what we think that we agreed we should do. This is how we agreed we should do things going forward. And then hopefully when we meet again, we're able to look back and say, what has come out of it? This is a bit of a challenge because we have webinars every year, but all of these webinars are recorded. As you know, we're going to try and, at the end of the year, conceptualize a report that will take into account everything that was discussed. These are very important topics. That's one point. The other point, which you saw, is that I'm working on my PhD. You know, I need to return to my PhD because I'm under pressure here. Dr. Jon-Hans Coetzer have been telling me to get on with it. I'm doing that. The other thing, and this is my question to all of you, if we, panelists, please think about this. In my world of communicators, PR and communication market people, there are two kinds. There are two kinds of animals. There are people who work as how to say, who receive instructions from clients, from bosses, from political bosses to go and say this to the public out there, to the audience out there. But often they are never part of the conceptualization of those messages. And this is again in response to what Dr. Marube said. I really love the questions that you asked. What role do you as communicators play for your brand? Whether it's a country brand, we're discussing country brands here, of course. Are you just people who take orders to go and say this to the world? Or do you play, and which is a second category of speakers, of communicators for me, chess players? In other words, you play at the strategic level. You want to be able to say to the politicians, to the bosses of the companies you work with, this is how we should do it. That's not how we should do it. So you should position yourself not as somebody who gets sent to say something, but somebody who says to your principals, you can't say it that way. Okay. How do you position yourself vis-a-vis a client that is doing wrong? A client that is maybe dumping stuff in the environment. Do you go there and say, no, they're not dumping stuff? A client that abuses human rights or other kinds of rights. So I think that communicators should position themselves as leaders, as Dr. Marube said, as people who say, that's not how you do it. We can communicate that. Many of you know the story of Bell Pottinger in South Africa, right? And how it ended. So my question to you communicators is, are you selective in the commissions that you take? Or are there times when you say, no, I cannot be the communicator for that particular project because it doesn't speak to my values and it's wrong for my country in terms of country destination? Now, if you have a leadership that's political, that is doing everything wrong, would you be the person to speak, to spin for them? Would you accept to be employed because you're being paid to go there and say, yeah, we are good, we're doing well, when you know that human rights are being violated all the time? And I think this is a problem with Africa, because a lot of times we have all these negative things being said by us, but a lot of people who lead those narratives are the communicators. Should communicators accept wrong commissions? Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, President Moeng. You are talking ethics now. It's very deep, but again, that's not the topic for today. It's about country branding and the countries. Now, we've got a question, we've got a hand up, and I can see why this person was one of the first 4 to tune in or to join the meeting 30 minutes before. Alpha Paul Mwangi. Please introduce yourself and ask your question. You can say who you're directing your question to. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, I'm so glad to be on the call today. So I'm Alpha Paul Mwangi from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a Director of Communications and Marketing of NCSA. So NCSA it's an organization which is a national Christian student organization, which is headquartered in Uganda, now affiliated in Kenya. So I wanted to direct my question to Dr. Marube, who is in the Public Relations Office of Kenya. So my question is about the youth, because we are talking about country branding, and we're talking about how we can basically get to put an image to our countries and specifically also Africa as a continent. So I'm looking at maybe what role do you think the youth can be playing in terms of ensuring that actually the country's brand comes up as the best there is? Since looking at it, we're looking at cultures, we're looking at innovation. There has been a lot of tech and innovative things going on in Africa. So I want to know at what position is the youth placed in terms of establishing a country's brand. Thank you so much. It is so much of a pleasure to be on the call.
Thank you so much. There's a young person who's asked a very relevant question. But in order to accommodate other questions, maybe let's take 2 more. And once we've got 3, then we can allow the panelists to respond to the questions. Okay. I'm just checking there's no hands up. Okay. Dr. Marube, maybe we should get you to respond to this question. It's more concerned about the youth and their involvement in country branding. Where connectivity challenges for Dr. Marube. Let's see if he's still here.
Maybe he can't hear you.
Yes, I'm sorry, Victor. Challenges getting the question. I'll challenges getting the question. If you don't mind, you could rephrase it. Perhaps someone else will take it.
Okay.
Since our challenges getting the question.
But okay, it looks like it's directed to you in Kenya, but I think any other person can take the question because it's more about getting the youth involved or engaged in country branding, especially looking at issues around culture and innovation.
Okay. Thanks, Victor. Okay. If I would mention, if I would respond to that particular question, is that the speaker is quite right in asking the question, to what extent are the youths involved in branding? But also bearing in mind, as earlier indicated by the other speaker, I think it was the professor from the US, regarding that the millennials and the youth basically are the bulk of the global, but not global audiences, but also the local audiences. So the question I think for me would be, as communication specialists or as agencies like where I work for, what programs do we have in providing an opportunity, mentoring and providing leadership to the youth so that they're able to help in crafting the narratives, participating in positioning what we consider to be unique aspects of that particular country, be it in innovation, be it in sports, be it in cultural, whether it's contemporary culture or probably any other culture that would be, then I think that's a challenge that we need to think through as agencies, that we need to have the youth speak and engage to the youth. Because in the next 5 or 10 years, most of the people enjoying the perceptions on nation branding from different countries are the youth of now. These are guys who are probably right now, they're maybe from 18 to about 35 years old. Then the question is, do we craft messages and do we give them sort of leadership within what I would call the nation branding value chain? Do we give them such opportunities, and how can we as communication experts and agencies who lead in nation branding provide that? So for me, I take that as a positive challenge that we need to think about the youth for us to have an impact in nation branding.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Marube. Quite mouthful. There's a lot of challenges we're facing, especially in the area of young people and the youth. But one thing that we need to clarify with our young people is that they shouldn't at any given time think of the privileges that are really not much of benefit to them, and some of which they think is the culture of entitlement. They're entitled to get things done for them. They need to rise to the occasion. And we have a serious leadership deficit because a lot of young people think things must be done for them instead of them jumping in. So we need to create opportunities as seasoned practitioners. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take a hand. Arthur Olowo, please introduce yourself and ask a question. You're more than welcome to say who your question is directed to. Over to you, Arthur.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon from Uganda. My name is Arthur Olowo. I am a social entrepreneur with the NCSA, and my question is directed to Professor Jacqueline Strayer. She talked about positivity, having a lot of positivity when you look at nation branding. But we're in an age where fake news is flooding the internet. We have the pandemic, we have vaccines and all this. How do we as young people counter fake news? Because when we want to be positive about what's happening, so much negativity keeps creeping up, and we are lost in that. So I would kindly ask her to find a way to help us with this issue of fake news. Thank you.
Okay, the question is directed to Professor Jacqueline. We have another hand. Please allow me to take this, and then when we taken this one or the third one, then we can get on to responding to these questions. Madam Sarah Kagingo from Uganda.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you everyone who has joined us. A speaker pointed out a very serious matter on ethics and values, and on us PR and comms practitioners taking leadership. And someone else about whether comms and PR practitioners are willing to spin for politicians who may sometimes just not be doing the correct things, and it stands against our values. But overall, I think there are several spokespeople from Africa about doom and gloom of the continent, especially since the change of the media landscape with citizen journalism. Sometimes you read about several African countries and you think they are on fire, you think they are burning. And when you travel to those countries, you find the situation is really different. So I think the call to us should be that even as we all face challenges, all countries in Africa may be facing some challenges, just as all the others in the rest of the world. These challenges are not insurmountable. We must coalesce on a minimum level on national interests that benefit all of us. For example, security for all, health for all, stability in our countries. And in so doing, how do PR and comms practitioners contribute to the growth of our own countries over and above our little brands and organizations we may be working for? Can we push the agenda to have as many made in Africa products to the rest of the world, penetrate these markets? And at our own professional level and practicing level, have we settled for, because sometimes you attend events and you find the head of communications carrying branding material, taking photographs, the departments are not fully composed. Have we settled for being the technical guys, or are we contributing to strategic thought leadership of the organizations that we work for or agencies, and for that matter, the bigger picture of our national interests and as a continent at large? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Kagingo. Asante sana. Ladies and gentlemen, the time is 28 minutes past 3. We're scheduled to finish at 3:30, but I hope and wish that the panelists have time to spare. If you allow us, we can add in another 50, we can extend with another 15 minutes. And those that may want to have a conversation, we are available. We can push until 4 o'clock, but we really don't want to temper in your schedules. Some of you have got meetings set up for other engagements. Let me take the third question from Juanita Mramba, and then we'll go back to the panelists to respond to the questions that have been asked. Juanita, please introduce yourself and do mention who your question is directed to.
Thank you, Victor. My name is Juanita Mramba from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. I am a corporate relations and communications specialist, having worked for the banking industry for about 16 years. I really do not know who to address this question to specifically, but I just wanted to find out, how do we as communicators leverage on technology, or what we now call the fourth industrial revolution or industry 4.0, to make sure that we can brand our countries appropriately. And I do remember that Professor Strayer mentioned earlier about people spending an average of 8 to 10 hours on social media, and there's so much clutter. So how can we distill that and really be able to leverage on technology to effectively and efficiently brand our countries? That's my question, Victor. Thank you.
Wow, very, very good question. I'm certain that there are panelists that will be able to respond to that question, and one of which would be President Tebogo Ditshego, the president of PRISA. He's very big in that space. But let's start with the first question from Arthur Olowa. Professor Jacqueline from the United States, please respond to Arthur's question.
Well, Arthur, you asked a very hard question. And if I had that answer, we'd all be in a different place. But when you ask a question like that, which is a really important question, I think of the Spanish philosopher Gasset, who said, "Tell me what you pay attention to, and I will tell you who you are."
Yeah.
And I think as we look at the proliferation of news media channels and content and the ubiquity of so much of it, there are important elements that people need to look at in terms of how they sift through content. And in fact, I think the fundamental aspect of it is really educating people on what channels are really credible ones that have integrity and ones that don't. We certainly saw this hands down in the pandemic. In this country in particular, if I talk to people in different parts of the country, their reality or their understanding of reality was vastly different from mine because of their news information and what they were getting. So I think that the one of the aspects of it is really that there needs to be education of what are the credible news sources and basically advancing what that is. People get their news feeds from the information they're paying attention to. So if you get news that's basically funneled into you, you're going to get it based on where you're going on your electronic devices, and we know this. So I think that the fundamental, I get back to it, is the education, the understanding, and the advancement, as well as the communication about the misinformation that exists out there, and for people to really call it out when they see it so that there can be actually more understanding of what that is. Unfortunately, there's no easy answer with this one because of the way the media works online and technology and the way we actually get information that comes into us. So Arthur, I wish I had a better answer for you.
Thank you so much. That is quite a mouthful. It actually sits very well. Let's move over to the next question from Sarah Kagingo, who touched on ethics and values. I think the speaker, or the panelist that really spoke a lot about that in particular is Dr. Marube. Dr. Marube, can you respond to Sarah's question or comment on ethics and values, and also on the challenges faced by communication and public practitioners on having to write and say things that are untoward instead of telling the truth or being ethical in their conduct? Okay, if there's no one else, if Dr. Marube is not here. Okay, Dr. Marube.
Okay, thank you, Victor. Sarah asked a very good question on what I call walking up the slippery slope of communication practitioners, perhaps even branding practitioners. Because the question Sarah asked is a question of identity. You ask yourself, who are you as an individual, or who are you as your nation? And whether what you project or what you present is aligned to both your national values and your personal values. Because ideally, for you to talk about nation brand, that means that there needs to be consonance between personal values and national values, so that there is something that is agreeable. So I think for me, that's a conversation that we need to have, which is more of an ethical question. And remember, ethics is also a very broad topic, because what is ethical in particular circumstances may not be ethical. But I think then the question would be, why don't we start with what we all agree upon? What does not place us in an ethical dilemma? Are we able to project, profile, and brand aspects that we believe in, so that we do it so well, so that the other areas where you have challenges, what I call the ethical dilemma, where you face the ethical dilemma, then you could probably pause. But I'm sure when you have one or two assignments now from as a communication specialist, even at a national branding level, not everything, it's not everything that you cannot believe in. There are a few things that you believe in. Why can't we focus on what we believe in, what is factual, what gives us that confidence to articulate the nation brand or probably project the perception that you want. And then now you could have boardroom conversation. We could have those issues at the back end. For me, I think that is the response I would provide. Let's focus on what you believe in, articulate it, and do it so well. Because a country, just like an organization, can be known so well for only one or two things, which is factual. It can't be everything. I think for me, that would be my observation.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Marube. Ladies and gentlemen, let's just get the third question answered. And I do have a couple of hands at the Embassy of Ghana. Please stay there. Ivan Baguna, please hang in there. President Tebogo, Tebogo Ditshego, please hang in there. And I'm going to ask you to actually answer the last question, and then you can ask your question. Right, the last question from Juanita Mramba from Tanzania. She is asking, how do we leverage on technology? We are in the 4th industrial revolution, and I think we are fast going towards the 5th. COVID has just shown us that it is possible with 4th industrial revolution, but what will make things quite more challenging and easy to navigate our lives and ourselves and our businesses is through technology. President Ditshego, can you respond on this question, and then I'll give you a first chance to ask a question?
Okay, I'm not going to ask a question. I was just going to answer.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. CEO. And thank you, panelists, for a great conversation that we've had. I just wanted to summarize it because Juanita is asking a very important question around how do we leverage technology? Now, let's go back to what Professor Lumumba said. We got to get rid of the box. And so if we get rid of the box, we'd understand that we should invest in research and development. The first question we need to ask ourselves is, what platform are we using currently? It's Zoom. Zoom is from the United States. And so they are leveraging technology by removing the box and creating their own ambassadors. Now, when we speak about ambassadors, as the colleague from Kenya has said, an ambassador is not just your citizens, what they're saying on social media. An ambassador is also what you've been able to create, what you've been able to produce. For example, an ambassador for South Korea is Samsung. LG Electronics is an ambassador for Japan. McDonald's is an American ambassador. Mercedes-Benz is a German ambassador. Tesla should have been a South African ambassador, but it's now an American ambassador. Champagne is a French ambassador. We've got Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We want to use those to spread messages. They create those and control those platforms. And they stand as ambassadors that are there on a daily basis that we use on a daily basis. And so that's why I said the presence of your brand in other countries, what you have been able to produce is what makes people interested in your country because they admire what you have produced. And how do we produce those things? We have to invest in young people, invest in great ideas, create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive, to be deliberate in ensuring that African products are able to go to other countries. And I think if you go back to economics and economics argument is that you've got brilliant people in Africa, but one of the things that differentiates, a Germany from an African country would be that they've got the brilliant people working together, producing Mercedes-Benz and BMW with the backing, with the financial backing and the enabling environment. Whereas we've got brilliant people, but one of them is opening, an engineer is probably opening a computer store to fix computers on his own. They're not coming together. And so if we look at an example like Samsung, they've got 7,600 people with a PhD degree working on innovation. And so they spend about 196 billion rands. In dollars, you'd have to divide it by 5. In order for you to see, you'd have to divide it actually by 13. In order for you to see how much they spend on research and development. As a country, we spend divided by 5, 196 billion rands, which is about 35 billion rands per annum on research and development. That is why we can't produce, the kinds of products that they produce and move forward. But I think another thing is that our story can be told on those technological platforms. So you do have countries like Singapore who've got brilliant stories, that they've told, and they're safe, and they've got tourist attractions that attract people to come to their countries. So if we're looking for low-hanging fruit, our story is something that we can provide to the world. Our culture is something that we can also provide to the world. But if you want people to promote your country, you need a solid identity, and you build that solid identity through the culture as well as the education system. You need people to have pride in your country, and the only way they'll have pride and confidence in your country is if you invest in them, you create an enabling environment for them to thrive, and in future, they will be the Teslas and the McDonald's and the Mercedes-Benzes of the world that they will take to the world, because they would have been able to succeed and realize their potential.
Thank you very much, President Ditshego. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to also not ignore those that are on the chat that are posing their comments on the chat group. Wanda Lubelwane, he says, country branding is not separate from country long-term strategy and developmental plans. The challenge is sitting through the media and stakeholder view cluster to articulate a country positioning that firmly affirms the country's value proposition within the global environment without it being done or perceived as a spin. Very important. Thank you so much, Wanda, for that comment. And we also have a very humble comment also here from Kimuri FM, says, I think this issue of mentorship should be given priority because it's good to package ourselves first as individuals. Humbly request for mentor. He's got his email in here. We will share the email with our fellow professionals, but we also would like to find out where exactly is Kimuri based. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take more questions. There was a question from Embassy Ghana. Please introduce yourself and do mention who's your question directed to.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Kofi Tonto, here in Embassy of Ghana, Washington, D.C. I'm here to represent the Minister of Information of the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Kojo Opon Nkrumah.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm also the head of information here in Washington, D.C. for the Republic. My question is, goes to the gentleman from the United Nations, and then also from all of us as PR persons. Currently, when you have a conversation with young people especially, you see that all their views and solutions are steeped very highly in Western viewpoints. It's almost like every narrative and every interpretation of issues come from a Western viewpoint, and therefore relegating African viewpoints as primitive, backwards, etc. If Africa wants to brand itself globally, if the various countries in Africa want to brand themselves globally, we need to be able to speak from our own perspective. We need to be able to speak from our own narrative. So my question is, as the gentleman from the United Nations, how are they helping us to shape the African narrative, especially at the United Nations? All the viewpoints and the solutions that are coming up at the United Nations, are these narratives that include our viewpoints? I know we do have African nations as member states, but are they genuinely including our viewpoints to shape the world as we know it? Because if Africa can't tell our own narrative, as Professor Lumumba was saying, and do things the way we feel will be beneficial for us, and our youth only see success and narrative from Western viewpoints, then I think we won't be successful at branding Africa the way we want to brand Africa. I hope my question makes sense.
Please take over. All right. Okay. May I ask Dr. Jon-Hans to respond to the question?
Thank you very much. An excellent question. And I will respond to you in the very direct manner that you posed the question. Absolutely. Remember, the United Nations is the voice of the people. The voice of the people are articulated through national law and the law of culture. Your elected leaders articulate through different resolutions the voice, however, of the people, of the country. However, this is where, in my opening statements, I was saying you need not to repeat the knowledge in business practices, in public relations and communication of the so-called Western or North American models that you then try to apply. What needs to be done is amplify your indigenous knowledge, amplify the voice of your young people. And yeah, I would really, again, challenge the young people and to say, what is the difference between you and Einstein? Einstein didn't complete high school. Einstein went to the University of Zurich 3 times. He was rejected, but he believed so fundamentally in what he wanted to do in terms of his studies that he didn't take a no. And this is what I want to say to you is, don't look at the other person to give you that opportunity. Make that opportunity, create it. And technology, as you heard the previous speaker who spoke, there is so much opportunity and possibility by using technology. There is a lot of open platforms. Use that, become your own brand ambassador and amplify the voice, the value proposition, not of a company, but you as a generation, you as young African leaders, what you stand for, your values, that can then be articulated into what becomes a proposition. But then I also have to say that we heard the idea of the South African who went off Tesla. Why is Africa not celebrating Tesla? Why is it that he doesn't call back on his roots that are in South Africa? So where is there that disconnection? And I think that is, again, there are success stories, there are champions. Tap into that and make that a partnership that's going to work for everybody. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. I've been asked to just, my good friend, the host is right behind me. You can see him. Thank you very much, Dr. Jon-Hans Coetzer. I have a question that I want to ask to Dr. Sudha Chakravarti. You do research at the EU Business School, and this is a very important topic. To what extent do you teach business students about country communication? Does it matter?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I mainly teach the undergraduate section, so that's what I can speak about. Definitely in international relations theory, at least, we speak about it. Of course, we kind of attach it to soft power and country branding as such, but we have country branding and nation branding as a part in the PR courses, definitely. So it is one of those subjects that is coming up. It's gathering a lot of momentum. And not to be misunderstood, I mean, there is still a lot of, let's say, confusion around it in terms of at least the strategies that, let's say, nations adopt, because everybody talks about the same thing. This is how we promote ourselves, and et cetera, like what really works. And same with soft power, as I was speaking about. One of the things is it's very difficult to operationalize soft power if you don't have the hard power, particularly economic power. It's a bitter pill to swallow. It is a bitter pill to swallow. And coming from India, I realized that what we had, we have the history, we have the culture, we have the ethnicity, we have the diversity, we have everything. We have all geographical, weather climates and everything that you can have. We have the Himalayas, we have the coastal places. But till 1990s, let's put it this way, since independence, if you've looked at the Indian aspiration and the aspiration of the, let's say, the middle class today, which is post 1990s, is very different. So there are aspects of hard power, which includes, let's say, whether it's economy, whether this is financial institution. One thing we haven't really done in India and we have not succeeded very much is regional integration. Same problems in Africa. It's very difficult to trade with each other, infrastructural challenges. It has to go hand in hand. So I can position myself as much as I want. I mean, we have had also destination branding 2011. For a country the size of India, we had less tourists, and I'm not playing down on the country. I'm going to mention we had lesser tourists than Ukraine. And I'm not taking away anything from Ukraine, but if you just see the size to whatever else, why did we have lesser tourists than Ukraine? I mean, we were positioning ourselves in many different ways, but finally it's those values that you stand for. And particularly in this digital era, people understand very easily what kind of values you really stand for. Okay, what are those public goods you create? Okay, and so it has to finally relate to that. It's not like what we do, let's say in business, but why we do it. This is what makes Apple different from, let's say, Dell to whatever else. Okay, and that meaning, and somebody mentioned, of course, ethics and everything. You can go back to Nicomachean Ethics of Aristotle, who spoke about the pyramid. Most branding, whether you're looking at business or country, you're at the lowest level of the pyramid.
Right.
Physiological needs. I mean, we have great beaches. So do we. Okay, we have this, we have that. Yeah, but you're looking at branding yourself from a very, very low, I mean, the lowest level of the pyramid. You need to go a little higher, the meaning you make. So that's why many business brands fail to satisfy. You can look at an ad and you're like very excited about it. Like, let's say, you know, in the 1980s, you had Campari with friends. And it was a brilliant ad with people having fun. But generally, it does not live up to that. Same with tourism. Sometimes it does not live up to that. I mean, there is the hassle of visa. There is the hassle of taking a flight. There is a hassle of many other things. So, you know, you have to think about many other things. But at the end of the day, I'm coming from the area of international relations. It has to go hand in hand. Hard power is essential. Bitter pill to swallow, but we need that.
Thank you very much. Before I hand over back to Victor, just one more question. You know, the question about mentorships keeps coming up, and a lot of times we have this. A lot of you guys on this platform, especially you, the panelists, are very well experienced, very well qualified people. We also have a lot of young people. Some of them are students listening in, and they privately sending messages to say, "I need to be mentored. I need to be mentored." All of you leaders in PR and communications, how do we formalize, or what more needs to be done to create opportunities for people who want to be like you in 5, 6, 10 years time, to shadow you, as it were? Should these professional bodies create perhaps more visible opportunities for young people to link up with somebody for mentorships? What do you think needs to be done that has not been done to facilitate mentorships at a global scale? Jon-Hans, Dr. Jon-Hans.
Sorry, I really think success starts at home. I give you my own experience. So in South Africa, when the Denel, which was attached to the South African Department of Defense of the previous regime, and they were manufacturing and exporting landmines. I was at that time working with the Red Cross, and we decided that we have this unique opportunity to challenge the government to make sure that the Denel is disconnected from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and there was that ban on. It's called the UN 1970 ban on certain conventional weapons. South Africa was one of the biggest exporters in the world of this murderous weapon. And I came under personal attack sometimes by some of the security forces at the time, but we managed to bring about that ban. And that's why you have this today. When the community in South Africa, in a lot of the rural communities, the big wave of HIV infections, we went to corporate business in South Africa and said, help us, we need to have community-based primary healthcare centers so that we can provide for the communities. So by working with the community, for the community, you create opportunities and you will be recognized, and that will be the platform. I think we should not be blinded by this idea of, oh, we're all going to be Greta Thunbergs or we're all going to Madibas. Start working in partnership with your local community, and those success stories is going to help to propel you forward. But never, never, never forget the community, because they are who you will always be.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got 5 minutes to go, but please allow me to allow there's somebody connected with a Galaxy Prime phone who'd like to ask a question.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Nicholas Simani. I'm communication consultant here in Nairobi, Kenya, at the Kenya Judiciary. And I would like to get a clarification. I think it's Dr. Marube, who's the president of the PRSK here in Kenya, regarding brand ambassadors. Are we saying that all comms and PR practitioners can be brand ambassadors? Or what is the right criteria for us to have individuals as brand ambassadors? Because there's the ethical issues that come in terms of looking at people who can actually be brand ambassadors. I just wanted a clarification on that.
Dr. Marube, I'm not sure if you're still around with us. He is there. I'm not sure he can hear me. Dr. Marube, that question was specifically for you. Okay, there you are. Did you hear the question?
Can we repeat it? Having challenges. I heard just at the tail end of brand ambassador, if you don't mind.
Okay, the gentleman is from your country, your home country.
Yes.
He wants to know, can just anybody be a brand ambassador?
Brand ambassador. Yeah, my question is absolutely yes. And that's what nation branding is all about. Nation branding is not about paying someone to be an influencer. It's somebody feeling that I like who I am. I like who we are. I like what you are doing. I like the experience so far. And then they shout about it. Then they let other people know about it. And for me, that is what a brand ambassador is for nation branding. So the answer is nation branding is for anyone who believes in the nation brand. And I believe that is the ultimate goal on nation branding.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Marube. Ladies and gentlemen, I wouldn't like to take advantage of your good nature. We've asked to go up until 4 o'clock, but we've got Ivan Gumba, who is going to be the last person. They often say, he who loved last, loved best. So we've left the best for last. Ivan, please ask your question, after which I will then take it back to President Moeng to wrap up.
Thank you so much for that grand introduction. My name is Ivan Philip Baguma. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing at the National Christian Students Association. Yes, my question is not the same as the clarification that came just before me, although I do want to find out the same criteria of the brand ambassador. Since we've agreed corporately that this brand ambassador or the country branding is a very important thing and a matter of urgency, I would like to know, how can a lay citizen skill themselves up to become a person who can brand a country, or at least express the brand of a country? Are there ways we can do this without having to go through conventional education systems like the university and all those? Because 70% of the population, I think worldwide, may even be 70% youth. So if that's the case, how do we get these people who they call the young people or the youth to get skilled up really fast so that they can be able to represent their countries on a global platform? Thank you so much.
Okay, very interesting question, and it seemed to be quite a burning issue on brand ambassador and ambassadorship. I think without belaboring the point, if there's anyone else who may respond to that other than Dr. Marube, maybe it will go down quite well. It will be well understood.
I can, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry to
Thanks,
interrupt. And I'm taking some notes. So it's a great question and it's an important question. And I think what you're talking about is simplicity. How can we simply get information into the hands of people so that they can actually become brand ambassadors without it, a very involved educational program? The most important thing is to create the brand narrative, to have basically, as we talk about in PR, to have your key messages and your proof points. What are the major statements you want to make about your brand? And what are the elements that support with evidence that that is so? If you get that information out broadly through social channels, that can actually help educate people very quickly without having to go through formal means of classroom experiences and all of that, to get that information into the hands of people. I worked in organizations with hundreds of thousands of people, and we did just this. We actually educated our employees on how to be brand ambassadors of the company. The same basically process, strategy for that can actually be used in countries to get information broadly in the hands of people so that they understand and can simply basically on recall, just basically advance the key messages about their country, about their continent, what makes them unique, what makes them exciting, and basically how they can actually advance that as a brand ambassador. It doesn't have to be difficult.
Thank you so much for that response to the question. Ladies and gentlemen, I know the word captured in South Africa is used in a very bad way, but I see here in this webinar, you are captured, and you are captured for good reasons, and the engagement is amazing. We've come to the end of the webinar. Those of you that may have wanted to ask questions, please pardon us. Juanita, I saw your hand was up. I don't know whether it was the legacy hand, you didn't take it down last time. But please be advised that the recording of this webinar will be put on the Africa Brand Summit website, where you can access with the contact details, of course. Before I hand over to Mr. Moeng, the convener of African Brand Summit, let me announce next month's webinar, the 29th of July, will be a very interesting but very deep discussion, the China effect. The question is, can Africa be assertive and retain control of its sovereignty? And what lessons from past domination can Africa use to avoid a repeat with the new masters? We know this China and South Africa and Africa is an issue. So that will be a topic for next month. And we are highly likely to be led by Professor Pielo Lumumba on this topic. Certainly, we will have other speakers or panelists that will participate in this discussion. With this, ladies and gentlemen, special word of thanks from me, and thank you so much for allowing us to facilitate this session for you. I'd like to hand over to Mr. President Moeng to wrap up. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, President Sibeko. Thank you to all of you around the continent, in the diaspora, in India, in Lisbon, in Bulgaria, all over the world, for being part of this awesome conversation. Clearly 2 hours was never going to be enough for this kind of conversation. I think we need to find another way to continue the conversation on other platforms, but also perhaps maybe on the basis of what has been said here, reshape a conversation for the future. I know that we had a lot of panelists, it was really hard to limit the number of panelists because all of them are so awesome. So we're not going to be giving them each an opportunity to say one way to say goodbye, because then we need another 30 minutes for that. But I would like to thank each one of them for having taken the time to be with us here today. There's an opportunity, there's a need to continue this conversation. There's a need to meet again next year so that Dr. Marube doesn't say, but we discussed this last week or last year. Where are we? What has been done after that? So we're working on this every day, and we'd like you to continue to be part of this growing community. We've had 4 or 5 organizations being part of this, all of them awesome organizations, and we don't have a choice. We really don't have a choice as Africans, as citizens of other parts of the world, but to be connected. No country can just walk around with his eyes fixed on its belly button and think that it can survive this world that is increasingly connected, where digital is king, content is queen. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's keep doing this. I appreciate you all.
Thank you, Siyabonga, Asante, Bayadanki, Rialeboha. Have a pleasant afternoon. We're really looking forward to seeing you on the 29th of July. When we send out the invite, if you're interested in participating, you're more than welcome to contact us on the details provided on the electronic flyer. Have yourself a pleasant afternoon and a pleasant evening. Elsewhere in the world, it's different time frame, by the way. Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. 5 p.m. in Uganda. Shout out
Bye
from
bye,
the
everybody.
Power
Thank
Africa.
you,
Bye,
Mr.
bye,
Ditshego,
bye.
President Ditshego,
Bye, bye.
everybody, all of you. You're awesome, awesome, awesome.
Bye.
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 Thank you.